She's still laughing.
That's so funny. Welcome to 5 Lemons Left. We're the real stuff, the lemons making lemonade. So pucker up, because we're going to be discussing our life's lessons and the nitty-gritty details of our spiritual journeys.
Hey y'all, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Drusilla.
I'm Melissa.
Hello, this is Morgan.
And I'm Penny. Welcome to our podcast today.
Oh, welcome to another amazing episode of 5 Lemons Laughing. We're 4 lemons today. Melissa is off on the West Coast, so we wish her love and we miss her. Today, we're talking about clear, compassionate communication. And that is my theme of the year, is clear communication. It's so funny. Next week on our podcast, we're going to do mid-year check-ins. And I thought that I had claimed clear communication at the beginning of the year, but my lovely Lemonette, Morgan, really just set me straight on that. It was discipline. So clearly discipline, I just set it completely aside for clear communication. So next week, I'm going to invite all y'all to go back and revisit your notes or whatever you wrote down, your New Year's resolutions, and be ready to talk about those next week. So this week, clear communication, what does that mean? So what does clear, compassionate communication mean? Any of the Lemonettes want to weigh in on that?
Well, it's communication that's totally understandable, and it's conveyed in a way that people understand what the heck you're talking about. I mean, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, there is that. There is that.
Being impeccable with your words came to mind from the agreements. Yes.
And being impeccable with your words means you don't talk bad about yourself or others. I love the 4 agreements.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about you, Morgan? What does clear, compassionate communication mean to you?
Well, I think you ladies really covered it. And the word clarity is just coming up as a variation on the word clear communication, like what I, for one, am always praying for. It's clarity. So it's that same thing which we desire in our relationship with God or higher self. It's like, I mean, we can only give as we receive. I don't know. I'm rambling. Clarity. Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Well, there is that part of it, Morgan, the communication with God, right? Clear communication with God. Mine is, I'm learning the compassionate part, because for me, like actually speaking what I'm thinking to the ones that to people that mean a lot to me, right? I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want them to abandon me, right? I don't want to get kicked out of the tribe. So really saying what deeply matters to me or expressing a boundary, usually like I wait until like the balloon bursts and then it just comes out as anger, right? It gets conveyed completely wrong. And then I find myself walking backwards, trying to clean up the mess and then still not getting my message across. So the clear, compassionate communication, what it means to me is speaking my truth, having compassion for myself to actually speak my truth, and having the courage and the wisdom to speak my needs, my wants, my desires when I can do it with ease and grace as opposed to a reaction.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's powerful, Amanda.
I think for myself, and I'm thinking maybe for others listening in today, that I didn't really understand what my needs were, and I didn't even know how to communicate that. And so I'm just going to say this today because Thom Bond has a compassion course, the compassion course, and it just started like last week. I think they're still doing registration. It's like $95 a year, and they meet once a month or something like that. Anyway, every week you get more information from his book, The Compassion Course. But you were talking about compassion, and so that's what prompted me to bring this up, that in his course, I learned that, there's like unspoken needs and unspoken wants. And usually that's when communication breaks down, is when
Yes.
I'm not able to clearly communicate what I need. And then I don't take in the cues properly of what you need, because maybe you're not able to communicate it either. And so a lot of the course is just to begin with, it's you kind of think, okay, so I see that Amanda did, she kind of winced when I said that. Maybe she has a need to not be talked to that way or something like that. I'm just making stuff up now. But and so you take the cues that people are giving you also, and you try to figure out what their needs are and what your needs are, and then you try to meet, together so that everybody's needs get met. And so now I'm starting to ramble now, Morgan. Gosh darn it.
No, you're not. That's so perfect. And I'm so glad you shared that, because it was the perfect opening for me to lead in with this Queen's Code book that Amanda turned me on to, that I've been reading. One of my big ahas that I've had this week from reading that book is that we all have this idea of and this could be unconscious, but we all have this perfect person that we hold everyone up to this standard of a perfect person. And that perfect person is the perfect version of ourselves. So we're expecting other people to respond to situations and circumstances and things the way that the perfect version of ourselves would. And when they don't, then we get offended or pissed off or hurt. And half the population is male. So as a female, we're expecting men to respond to those unspoken needs and unspoken wants, and to just automatically know the correct response as the perfect version of me that we imagine that they are. And so that it sounds so simplistic, but that has been a huge eye opener to me. Having this imaginary, idealized, perfect version of ourselves that we measure ourselves against and we measure other people against is just like a tool for abuse, like an excuse to abuse ourselves and to abuse other people for not meeting our needs, not meeting our expectations that we haven't ever even spoken. So yeah, that's one of my big takeaways.
Perspective. I like that. What just crossed my mind, and I know you, Morgan, are also a very strong proponent of A Course in Miracles, of course, which we all are, but I know you're currently reading it. So how do you compare what you just stated to what the Course says about the fact that we should look at our brother and sister as whole and perfect? So then does it become that we're judging what they say? Not necessarily that we have those expectations, but when they don't deliver to those expectations, then we have judgment thoughts about it. Is that where the conflict, would you think, comes in?
Well, I'm just going to ask you to see if you can restate the question, just so I'm perfectly clear.
Ooh, she's looking for clarity.
You guys are speaking
all this communication stuff.
Way to be a good example, Morgan.
Yes.
Well, I think I got it, but I just want to make sure.
Yes. So from what I understood was that you're saying we have a expectation for the person that we're communicating with. We have a picture of them that's our perfect self, a version of them that equals our perfect self, which, according to the Course in Miracles, that's how you're supposed to look at your brother and sister. And that's how you're supposed to approach them and interact with them, as if they are whole and perfect. So in that case, then the only conflict becomes, this is my interpretation, a next step would be the only conflict there would be then that you judge them when they don't respond according to your expectations. Is that what you would discern?
Well, so everyone is whole and perfect exactly as they are. That goes back to our acceptance conversation that we talked about last week. And some of that may not make sense as we are having this experience of being in bodies and people seem to do things that are unloving and unkind. But as we zoom out and have this like a Course in Miracles perspective and affirm the truth, we're just affirming that people in their essence are whole, perfect, and complete, no matter what little dramas they may be playing out as their avatar. But I think this perfect idealized version of the self is an ego tool. It's like the ego can weaponize any spiritual tool. So this perfect person that I was referring to earlier is more of what happens when the ego gets a hold of that concept of perfection. I don't think it is contradicting what the Course says. It's like the perversion of that perfection. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it sounds like what you're saying is that, as you stated it initially, it's a ego to ego conversation.
Yeah. Yes.
Versus spirit to spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And for me, Drusilla, like my ego showing up, right? Like I know that I am perfect as God created me. And also I am moving in this world as a body with other bodies. And it gets easier to communicate when I let go of like holding myself as the perfect person, like letting go of my ego's version of the perfect person. And then that helps me see that perfection in the other person. And with all that said, it's really enabling me to actually speak my truth, being able to see that in the other person. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this conversation. I have to tell you, Amanda and Morgan and Drusilla, that I am a recovering okay, so I always thought that I had to be so it's like the ego perfect though. I don't even know how to explain this. So I thought I had to be perfect. It's also part of, some of the stuff that in my childhood that if I was perfect, then I wouldn't get punished. I wouldn't get so I have this very high level of perfection that runs me at times when I'm not partnered up with my higher Holy Spirit self. I have I have to be perfect and everybody has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, then it's bad. Like something bad's going to happen. And so it's so funny. I never realized it until maybe, I want to say 5 years ago, that I am perfectly imperfect, I guess is what I like to say. And that I don't have to be, and it's the ego perfect that runs me a lot, that I don't have to be that perfect. I can be just my perfectly imperfect person. And so can everybody else. And then life is so much easier. And I'm not even sure exactly how to explain that, but I thought I've learned that I held this, like you were saying, Morgan, I held this high ideal of how people should behave and be. And it's really impacted relationships tremendously in my life. And so, Yeah, I'm like blowing all that up. Uh, you know, it's a
Yeah.
process though for me as always.
Yeah,
Everything's
of
a
So,
process.
course.
Penny, do you think it's easier to communicate now, to have clear, compassionate communication as you're realizing this?
Yeah, I think what it is I'm like you guys all talked about acceptance last week. I wasn't here, but I think it's just accepting what is and not trying to think that it has to be different. And then learning to communicate my needs, and when my needs aren't being met, knowing how to take care of myself. I think that's all. It's just like it's this big soup pot that all this stuff is going in it, and I'm stirring it up and really great soup is coming out of it. And it's just all the things that I'm learning is really helping me to have clearer communications, not be so attached to outcomes. Yeah, all of that. Did that answer your question, Amanda?
It did.
Okay.
It did. Um, and a light bulb just went off for me. Like when we let go of attachments, right? So, okay, so I'm speaking my truth. I'm telling whomever what I need. If I let go of the attachment to how I think that they should react, or let go of attachments that if I say this, that they're going to leave, right? Like let go of all the attachments of feeling unsafe, feeling, like I can't do it, like letting go of all the attachments, my ego's attachments and my fear-based
Fear.
thinking.
Yeah.
Fear. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you let that all
What
go, then what happens, Amanda?
Well, I speak with more clear, like
Mm.
I can communicate with compassion and clearly, right? Like, so yeah,
Life just
speak
gets
my needs,
easier,
I
right?
want, like life gets easier. And at the
Mhm.
same time, there's different levels to it because it's harder too. But until I practice it, until I see that the world is not going to fall apart, it seems harder, right? It's the next level of healing.
Well, and our Five Lemons Laughing podcast has been a great practice ground, right? Because there's times when we need to tell each other things that we're afraid to tell each other, like, oh, they're going to get pissed off and leave, or they're not going to like me anymore, or whatever. But we've been practicing that together as we do this podcast. And yeah, I think that's been really beautiful. It's given us all a lot more confidence and more, confidence to just be who we truly are and not be worried about it. And Drusilla, go ahead. I can see you want to speak.
Yes, I was just going to comment on what Amanda said about it being very difficult, even though it does make life easier. I just this past weekend, I had this meltdown just for that exact reason, because I felt like I'm always taking the high road and everybody else gets to just blabber and say whatever the hell they want, however they want to. And then
I'm laughing because I totally get it.
And how it's serving me? How am I, Yes, I went through all of that just to get back to my sensible self, my higher holy self, which is my ultimate goal, to always, you know, speak with the highest of intentions.
So does that mean when people are blabbering on about whatever they want to blabber on around, is like the most compassionate thing for you to do is to be silent, or is the most compassionate thing to do would be like, excuse me, we need to pause here or check, right? That's where that's where it gets sticky.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is honoring yourself and, checking in with yourself to see what feels best in the moment.
Yeah, it probably depends, right, Drusilla?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how important is it. Like, is this going to move me forward in life if I speak up, or is this going to is this going to put me back in my ego? I think that comes into play.
Yeah. And
Yeah, situational.
Mhm.
yeah, and the operative, there's only two choices at any given time, and that's choosing fear or love.
Yeah.
And you just talked about the fear aspect of it, Amanda, in your example, which was the perfect example of that. The only other option is love. So either you're going to act out of fear or love. And if you can remember that, then it's probably going to be an easy decision.
Mhm.
And in
Yeah,
my
and when in doubt, silence is probably the better answer.
Probably.
Not all, I can't say always, right? Because if there's a pattern of silence, right? If there's a pattern of shutting yourself down, if there's a pattern of putting other people's needs ahead of yours in all instances, right? Well, then silence may not be the best way to
Yeah, I
break
think it
out that.
depends.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. In Al-Anon, I learned that, when somebody's going on and on and on and on and on, sometimes you just go, oh, you might be right, and you can just kind of, um, you don't have to say anything to agree with them or anything, but you can just, but I don't know for sure, Drusilla, what you were talking about. I shouldn't be making stuff up unless I have clearly understand the situation you were talking about. But yeah, I think it depends, really.
One thing I think that is helpful too, and I wish I could remember what you said that sparked this, Penny, but another takeaway from the book that I'm reading is to operate from the position of what if there's a good reason for that? What if there's a good reason for why they did that or why they said that? And to just kind of always be coming from that angle. And it made me think again, going back to the 4 agreements of like, we are innocent. We've just been programmed with some faulty programming, and maybe we have some viruses that need to be cleaned out of our programming. But if you clear out the faulty programming, if you clear out the viruses and the bugs, then the core is still good. It's still innocent. And so, Penny, going back to your story of if I'm not perfect, then something bad is going to happen. It was your innocence that bought into that programming. And so it's our innocence that adopts these maladaptive behaviors and responses to things. And so that's how we are perfect in our imperfection. Like it all stems from that place of holiness and innocence, even if it is maybe a maladaptive response. So, but yeah, that whole what if there's a good reason for that has been another big takeaway from that Queen's Code book that I mentioned. And like, even like to ask if I'm not clear, I'm sure there's a good reason that you did XYZ, but I'm not quite clear what it is. Would you mind explaining it to me?
I have a great example of that, Morgan.
Oh, good. Please share.
So, I've been watching a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's a scientist, and speaks in science stuff. And so Mike was looking up something, and it was all in science speak that was really hard to understand. And I took a pause and I was like, this is what I think it means. And Mike didn't say anything. And my brain went to, he doesn't believe what I'm thinking, right? He doesn't value what I just said. Like, I went down a dark rabbit hole. And then I'm like, let me just ask. And I, right. And I was like, what do you think about what I just said? And he's like, I'm just thinking about what you said. Right. And I thought he just had completely discounted me. Right. That was my ego going crazy until I asked, what if there was a good reason that he's not responding right now?
I love that example. Thank you for sharing that.
I like it.
Clear communication, right?
And it's helped me too with myself. Like there was something, I can't remember what it was, and it was something minor, but John Mark was like looking for something, and I had put it in a place that we don't usually keep it. It was something minor like that. And I acknowledged out loud, like, I'm sure there was a good reason in my mind that I did that, but I can't for the life of me remember what that was at this moment. So it's been fun to apply it to myself and to others.
Penny, you're muted.
Thank you. There was a train going by. I'm at my mother's house in North Dakota. We live close to railroad tracks in this little town, and a train just went by, and I thought the horn was going to blow, so I thought I better mute myself. But I was just saying that's a powerful tool that you're presenting to us, Morgan. On there might be a good reason for why they're doing what they're doing, and that's we just don't know, right? Unless we ask. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason might be just going back to that programming and their perfect innocence, like some defense mechanism that they have adopted that in their mind, it makes logical sense to them in that moment.
Yeah. And in Amanda's example, Mike was just processing what she said. He couldn't take it. Like sometimes we have to just process.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting when somebody is processing and you think they're discounting you or they're moving on without even acknowledging what you just did. Yeah. I love that you asked him, Amanda.
Yeah.
That was really taking good care of yourself.
Yeah. 3 or 4 years ago, I would have just thought he was an MFer, right? And I'd have stormed out.
There he goes again.
And he would have been so baffled.
Yeah. What's she on about now, right? And it just would have spiraled down from there.
That's so funny.
It is funny and not all rolled into one.
Well, if we can laugh about some of this stuff that we're being opened up to see doing it differently. I mean, I think laughter really helps us to, yeah. Again, it depends, but I think laughter can help if we can laugh at ourselves mostly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's why we call this 5 lemons laughing, right? That's a tool. Laughter is a spiritual tool that is amazing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So speaking of spiritual tools, when it comes to clear communication, if you are in a situation where, I mean, it could be Penny at one of your Al-Anon meetings, or it could be on the job somewhere at work or in a work dynamic, or it could be with your husband. But like, if something comes up that you feel like you owe it to yourself to be honest and disagreeable, to use that word, what are some practices that you can employ to share with clear communication, and how to suppress it, how to manage any fear that might come up or anxiety about being perceived as disagreeable? I don't know, any tools? Because I mean, I think for a lot of people, and particularly for a lot of women, it can be difficult to voice anything different from, I don't know, the status quo.
The number one thing for me to be able to speak differently is self-compassion, is loving myself enough to speak my truth, right? So that's where it started for me. That's number one, is showing up authentic, being able to have a podcast about spiritual topics, right? Like I had to let go of a bunch of other people's opinions about me, right? Or like interpreting other people's opinions. I had to let go of a lot of that, and a lot of self-discovery, and like myself enough to show up however I am.
That's
whatever
powerful. And I think that letting go of other people's opinions is a big piece of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's next level stuff, people, right? That's not I don't want to
That takes
label it as
discipline.
hard, but that takes discipline.
What?
So Amanda, you're doing a lot better than you thought.
Thank you, Drusilla. Thank you. I will receive that.
What about you, Penny or Drusilla? Any tips or tools for a situation like that?
Go ahead, Drusilla. I can just see you're ready to share.
No, I was just really going to agree with everything Amanda said. It's just really checking in with yourself and to be sure that you're honoring yourself. And it does get difficult, sometimes to even discern that. And a lot of times for me, it is what we talked about earlier. Sometimes I think I am really good at being silent. That part is not a challenge for me. And I do still think that works in my favor most of the time, as you suspected, Morgan. If you're not sure, silence is probably good, right? But I do feel that the word compassion and having self-compassion and the self-love of yourself can be reflected in every conversation. And so for me, the goal is the goal is to know that when you're honoring yourself, you won't have those moments of uncertainty. So I guess what I'm trying to say is what my question to Morgan in the beginning probably is to always be working on the awareness and aligning with spirit. And therefore, whatever comes out of my mouth is always going to be truth. And it's going to be with compassion. So trying to always be at the higher, which is what I had the meltdown for over the weekend. It is a journey, and it can be difficult, to always feel like you're striving, and it seems like everybody else just gets to relax and be just kind of, frivolous and funky with their attitudes. And so,
Frivolous
but
and
every
funky.
time, and every time that happens, though, what I have to remind myself is that they're just reflecting back to me some of the funky stuff inside of myself that I need to clear up.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the gist of what I'm trying to say. It always comes full circle. Even if someone is truly being ugly or nasty, they're probably reflecting something back to me anyways that I could kind of check in on.
So did you have a meltdown, like explode or implode?
A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I said a snarky thing to someone in my family. And then I sat there and said to myself, I really need to leave and go home, because anything else that I say is not going to come out and be compassionate the way that I would want it to. And so I didn't engage much anymore, especially with the parties that were giving me pause. And then when I came home, I had the meltdown with my husband about feeling the weight of being on the spiritual path and feeling like everybody else is just, walking around being their shitty selves or something. And that, it happens every now and again that I feel that. And I couldn't pick a better place to say that than here and now with you all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's the spiritual stuff. My favorite saying, the spiritual path is like a bait and switch. They don't tell you that kind of stuff, right? At the very beginning. On this, once you choose to a spiritual journey, it's not all rainbows and butterflies.
That's true. Yeah. Well, it's a process, right? I mean,
Mhm,
we're
mhm.
shedding all the the survival tactics, the ego stuff. We're shedding all that. And of course, I forget and I go back and, maybe am not so spiritual. So, yeah. Yeah. So the tools that work for me, I've been practicing every now and then when I'm in a situation and I really ask myself, like, how important is this? If I were to go to the last day of my life and this situation that's going on right now, is it really going to matter if my position is the one that is the one, if I have to defend myself, is it really going to matter in the grand scheme of things? Does this really matter? And normally the answer is no. Just let it go, Penny, right? And move on. And it's not a big deal. And I say that I found myself saying that, like, okay, Penny, this is not a big deal. This is not important. Move on. And let them just have what they want or whatever. It depends. I mean, I'm just kind of generalizing situations. And so for the listeners, I mean, it really depends on what the situation is. You'll have to discern for yourself if that works for you or not. Yeah, so that's one of the things. And then yeah, so just asking myself how important is it is a big one. Like, is this really that important for me to defend, or can I just let this go and live a happy, joyous, and free life? And typically the answer is I can let it go, but sometimes I don't, because sometimes it is important for me to stand for what I believe in, and that's okay. I also thought that everybody was supposed to do things the way I thought that was the right way to do things, right? Like everybody should live life the way I think is the right way to live. And I've
Absolutely, Penny.
exactly. Yeah, so I've learned that doesn't work either. Everybody gets to live life the way they want to, and I get to live life the way I want to. And my way may not be your way, and your way may not be my way. And that's what makes us this beautiful tapestry that's woven together, with all the people that come and go in through our lives. And so, yeah, that's another live and let live is another
Mhm.
tool for me.
Yes.
Yeah. I get to live the way I want to, and you get to live the way you want to. Yeah.
Morgan, you're muted.
Morgan.
Doggone it.
Thank you. A truck drove by a minute ago, so I muted myself. Sometimes you were saying, like, you evaluate if it's really important to speak up or if you can just let it go. And sometimes it's really important because of that self-compassion that you were talking about, Amanda, and because of that honoring yourself that you were talking about, Drusilla, and especially for some of us here who are recovering people pleasers, like, it's especially important just to flex that muscle and get that practice. And it doesn't have to be about who's right and who's wrong and who gets their way and who doesn't get their way. It's just about honing that practice of like, well, here's how I feel about it, or here's what I think about that, or here's what my preference is about that, and without attachment to outcome or without expectation of changing anybody's mind or position. But it really is just a practice. And I have found that it does get easier with practice, because it has never once in all the times that I have practiced gone as awful as that worst case scenario that I imagined in my mind, that, oh, I'm going to lose a friend over speaking my mind, or, they're going to think I'm a bee for speaking my mind. So, and then one other tool, it's not a different tool, it's the same tool that Drusilla mentioned, but just that practice of tuning in, and, like, if you can find the pause between, like, when you feel like you would like to respond to a situation, instead of just rolling over and being the doormat or being the pushover or just being the, oh, I'm fine with anything person. Like, if you can find that gap where you can do a quickie prayer, silent partnering up, and just reaffirm your commitment to being loving, then it really does inform the way that you respond. You come across as less defensive, less trying to convince anybody of anything. Like it's such a simple practice, but I have found that it causes me to speak slower and to really choose my words with care. And even to let there be a long, awkward pause while I'm trying to figure out the most loving way to speak what I feel like I'm being called to speak. So that's the only thing that I would like to add.
It's beautiful.
That is.
Yes. I can totally shift the energy. You're right, Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard a common theme in everything that we said, which is awareness. It's just being aware of yourself and what's happening inside you during that conversation, that communication.
Yeah, staying awake, right?
Yes.
Staying awake. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great
And if
insight.
you, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the time or the wherewithal to remember to pray in that moment, then like you can trust in your intention or your spiritual practice. Like that's when it's just practice time. It's just go time. And you just trust that, Spirit's got your back in the moment. And even if you fumble or are flubber, then there's plenty of grace and forgiveness and second chances and 50-second chances.
You know what? Just as you were saying that too, Morgan, another thing that came to mind for me is that when you want to communicate clearly and compassionately, I can't even say the word right now. Compassionately with someone. It's really important not to be doing other things. It's like, give them your full attention. If you're at your computer typing on your computer, stop and look at them. Or if you're doing something else, stop and pause and just be present. So it's about being present in the moment when you're trying to have clear, compassionate communications also. I think that's a simple tool that it's easy to forget because we're busy people, right? We got a lot of stuff to get done. And so, yeah, just pausing and being present is helpful.
Love that, Penny.
Mm-hmm.
And it's loving and respectful.
Yeah. And people feel like they're heard too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're all really looking for, right? Is to be heard, to be seen.
Yes.
Valued. Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. I just kind of feel like this is the part of our episode where we say, drop the mic and we say, we're done.
We are done.
We are done.
Any other words of wisdom from all you beautiful ladies? All you beautiful lemonettes?
Compassion, self-compassion first.
I love it. I do not have any Post-it notes with me today, so that's Amanda's Post-it. Self-compassion first. How about you, Drusilla? What's your final words of wisdom?
What's your Post-it, Drusilla?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I have to steal from Morgan. Stop and breathe. Just stop and breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Morgan?
I'm just going to go back to what if there's a good reason for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just pause and breathe. And awareness, I think, is what you said too, Drusilla, and be present. Those are all real things. Yeah. So thank you, ladies, for this another beautiful episode 81 of 5 Lemons Laughing. So grateful to be back. I was gone last week and we're missing Melissa today. So she'll be back with us next week. We trust that you will give us feedback if you have anything. We would love to know what you'd like us to talk about. If there's something specific, we're always open to exploring topics that our listeners bring forth. You can reach us on all the podcast platforms, and you can go to our website, 5 Lemons Laughing. That's 5 spelled out, FIVE. And you can see all of our 81 episodes there. So thank you again for joining us today. We really, really appreciate your attention and showing up every week for us. And yeah, so just pause, be present, and just love everybody that you're with. So thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.